The morning they towed her car, Renee had exactly $41 in her checking account and a second-grade permission slip on the kitchen table that needed $2 for the art museum trip. She stood on the curb and watched the flatbed ease down the block with her 2009 Civic strapped to the back, and she did not cry. She had known it was coming. The loan company had sent 3 letters. She had read all 3. She had sold the car herself, signed the title over 3 weeks earlier at a church parking lot for $4,300, and the tow was not a repossession but a transfer to the buyer, a woman named Sandra, who had driven it away humming to the radio. Renee had stood in that parking lot the same way she stood on the curb now, spine straight, chin level, hands quiet at her sides. $4,300. She had handed every cent of it to a hospital billing office on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and the man she had given it to was not her son, not her mother, not anyone she had ever met before that week. His name, as far as she knew, was Walter. He was 61 years old. He had a bad heart and no insurance and no family that anyone at the admitting desk could locate, and he had been sitting alone in the hallway of the cardiac unit when Renee walked past him with a food tray one Wednesday night during her shift. She worked as a dietary aide at Meridian Regional Medical Center. She wore a grey uniform with a plastic name badge that said Renee in block letters, and she pushed a cart from room to room for 6 hours each night, 5 nights a week, delivering trays and collecting them afterward. And she knew better than most people what it felt like to be invisible inside a hospital. Not sick enough for a room, not well enough to leave, just sitting. She had set a tray down in front of him that night and asked if he needed something warm. He had looked up at her with the careful, embarrassed expression of a person who had learned not to ask for anything, and he said he was all right, and she brought him soup anyway. What she did not know was that the man she had brought soup to was not simply a patient without insurance. She did not know his last name. She did not know that the floor she walked every night of her working life, the tile under her cartwheels, the supply closet she unlocked with a key clipped to her badge, the cafeteria where she collected herself before every shift. All of it belonged to him. She did not know any of that. She only knew he looked cold. His name was Walter Briggs. He had built Meridian Regional Medical Center from a 6-bed urgent care clinic in 1991 into a hospital system with 4 campuses and 2,200 employees. He had stepped away from the board 2 years earlier after his first heart attack, handing operational control to his son, Darius, and had lived quietly since then in a suburb 40 minutes north. He had come back to the hospital, not as an owner, but as a patient, under a name he hadn't used since childhood, because he had wanted to know what it felt like to arrive at the place he had built as someone who had nothing. He found out. He sat in that hallway for 4 hours before a nurse asked him to move to a waiting area. He sat in the waiting area for another 3 hours. A television mounted high on the wall cycled through a home renovation program, a regional news segment, and then another home renovation program. He had brought nothing to read. He watched the other people waiting, a young woman with a toddler who had fallen asleep across her lap, an older man in work boots who looked at his phone every 10 minutes with the careful expression of someone waiting for permission to leave, a teenager who kept glancing at the door. None of them looked at Walter. He was, without any effort, invisible. He thought about that. He had built this building. He had named the corridors. He had approved the colour of the chairs in this exact waiting area, and he couldn't now remember if the approval had been because he genuinely liked the colour or because the facilities memo had listed it first and he had said, fine. He could not remember. He had not thought about the chairs since. He was assessed by a physician's assistant and told his cardiac function was irregular enough to require monitoring but not acute enough for immediate intervention, which meant they were admitting him to a telemetry bed and that the billing office would need to see him before he was settled. The physician's assistant had been thorough and clear, and Walter had been grateful for that. He had also noticed the edge, not cruelty, nothing like that, just the faint quality of a person who had already assessed how much of the next 20 minutes was worth giving, and had arrived at a number and was sticking to it. The billing office told him what it would cost. He knew what it would cost. He owned the building. He had set those rates himself years ago as part of a board decision about the gap between what the hospital charged and what it could actually collect, and he had not thought about it since. He was thinking about it now with his $83 and his borrowed name in a chair that was the colour of a decision no one remembered making. He sat with that number for a long time. If you have ever watched a person absorb the cost of their own survival, you know the specific quiet that comes over their face. Walter sat with it. He agreed to a payment plan. The payment plan required a down payment of $4,000, which he did not have on him because he had come to the hospital in the clothes he wore to the garden and a wallet with his new simplified identity and $83. He was working out whether to disclose who he was when Renee brought him the soup. She came back the next night, and the night after that, she learned that his son, as far as anyone knew, was unreachable. She did not press him on it. She just brought the soup, and once she brought crackers, and once she sat with him for 8 minutes during her break because he had been coughing badly and she didn't want him to be alone while it passed. On the fourth night, she asked him straight what he owed. He told her. She went quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands on the cart handle, then back at him. "You got family?" she said. "I did," he said. "We got complicated." She nodded. She had her own version of complicated. A divorce 4 years back from a man who had left owing child support that never came. A son named Marcus who was 7 years old and who slept with a stuffed dog named Frank and who had asked her once why they didn't have a car like his friend Jalen had, and she had told him they were saving up for a better one, which wasn't entirely a lie. She did not tell Walter any of that. She asked if he had tried applying for the hospital's financial assistance program, and he said he didn't know they had one. And she said she would find out, and she did. And it turned out he earned too much in his simplified identity to qualify, which was a complicated lie, though she didn't know that. She thought about it for 3 days. She thought about it on the bus and on her break, and in the 8 minutes it took the shower to warm up in the morning. She turned it over, the way you turn something heavy, testing whether it has a side that makes it easier to carry. It did not get lighter, but on the 7th day she went to the billing office on her lunch break and asked them to apply $4,300 to the account of a patient named Walter, last name given to her by the charge nurse, and she pushed an envelope across the counter. The billing coordinator, a young woman named Priya, looked at the envelope and then at Renee. "Ma'am," Priya said, "is this patient a family member?" "No," Renee said. "Is he a friend?" Renee thought about that. "He's somebody who needs it," she said. Priya looked at the envelope for another moment. She processed the payment. She did not say anything else because what was there to say? Renee went back to her cart. What she did not tell anyone, not Priya, not the charge nurse, not her sister Claudette, who called every Sunday, was where the $4,300 had come from. She told Claudette she had taken care of a bill. Claudette asked which bill. Renee said never mind. She rode the number 7 bus to work after that. It added 38 minutes each way. She bought Marcus a transit card for the school bus and told him it was easier than driving. And Marcus accepted this because 7-year-olds accept a great many things from mothers who have never given them a reason not to trust them. She told no one. The number 7 bus left the corner of Maywood and Delmar at 5:47 in the morning. If she missed it, the next one came at 6:23 and she would be late to the hospital. And late was something she had not been in 7 years, and she was not going to start. So she set her alarm for 5:15, which was 20 minutes earlier than she had been setting it when she had the Civic, and she made Marcus's lunch in the dark and laid out his school clothes on the chair by his door and left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I love you, and will be home by 4, which Claudette, who came in to see him to the school bus, would read first and fold into her pocket. The bus was warmer than she expected in October and colder than she expected in November. She kept a pair of thin gloves in the front pouch of her work bag and put them on at the stop and took them off when she boarded. She did not read on the bus. She watched. There were regulars on her route, a woman with hospital ID on a lanyard who got off 2 stops before Meridian, a man in a maintenance uniform who slept against the window the full length of the ride, a teenage girl who spent the whole trip with her head tipped back and her eyes closed and her lips moving to whatever was in her earbuds. Renee noticed all of them the way she noticed people in the hallways of the hospital, with a kind of automatic warmth that did not require a reason. She did not regret the money. She knew herself well enough to know that was not something she was going to waste energy on. She had made the choice in the billing office with steady hands, and she would make the same choice again tomorrow if tomorrow brought her the same Tuesday afternoon. What she did sometimes on the cold ride home in the dark was think about the math. She was good at math in the way that people who have had to be are good at it, quickly and without sentiment, and the math kept telling her the same thing. She was going to need Terry to give her that 30 days. She did not expect anything. She was not the kind of person who calculated returns on kindness. She was not the kind of person who calculated returns on kindness. Her mother, Dora, had raised her in a small house in the Avondale neighbourhood with a habit of giving that bordered on impractical, and Renee had absorbed it the way you absorb the smell of a kitchen that always has something on the stove. You don't decide to carry it. You just do. You carry other things too. She was 3 months behind on rent by December. She had been 2 months behind when she sold the car, and the car payment disappearing had helped some, but the bus added to her commute, and the commute added to her childcare cost, and the math kept coming out wrong. She kept a ledger, a small one, in the same notebook where she kept her other lists, and she went over it some nights after Marcus was in bed. It was not a dramatic exercise, it was just the truth on paper. And the truth on paper said that she was not going to make it through February without something giving. She had not been in this position before, exactly, though she had been near it. The divorce had taken the second income and left the debt, and there had been a stretch 2 years earlier when she had worked a second job on weekends doing prep for a catering company, early Saturday mornings, 4 hours of chopping vegetables in a commercial kitchen that smelled like onions and industrial cleaner. She had done that for 8 months. She had stopped when Marcus got a respiratory infection that turned into pneumonia, and she needed to be available on weekends in a way she couldn't be if she was 40 minutes away with her phone silenced in a kitchen. She had let the catering job go without ceremony, and she had managed. She would manage now. She was good at it. She was simply very tired of having to be. Her landlord, a man named Terry, who owned 4 units on the block and had always been reasonably decent to her, left a note under her door the first week of December that said he needed to hear from her by the 15th. She called him. She asked for 30 days. He said he'd try. Marcus's school had a holiday program on the 18th. She pressed her uniform the night before because she worked a shift before the program and went straight from the hospital to the school gym, still in her grey uniform with her name badge clipped to the pocket, and sat in the second row. 3 other parents in the second row wore scrubs. They nodded at each other in the particular understanding of people who have come straight from somewhere else, and that small recognition felt like a kind of company. She watched her son play a reindeer, which required him to walk across a small stage wearing antlers made of pipe cleaners, and she clapped until her hands hurt. She did not think about money during that 12 minutes. She thought about nothing except his face. It is worth saying that Renee had not told anyone at the hospital what she had done, and the billing office, consistent with its own privacy protocols, had not disclosed the source of the payment to Walter. He had been told only that a payment had been received on his account. He had assumed it was the financial assistance program, reconsidered, asked Priya to clarify, and Priya had said simply that a payment had been made by a third party and that she was not at liberty to say more. Walter had checked out of Meridian Regional Medical Centre 4 days after the payment cleared. He had gone home with a prescription for 2 medications and a follow-up appointment, and a name he had used for 22 days that was not his own. He had not resumed his own name immediately. He had sat in his house for a week and thought. He thought about the hallway. He thought about the billing office. He thought about the physician's assistant who had been genuinely kind, and the one who had spoken to him with a small edge that he recognised, the edge of a person who has assessed how much time your visit is worth and has found the number modest. He thought about the soup. He called Darius in January. It was the first time they had spoken in 8 months. The estrangement between them was real and layered and had nothing to do with the hospital, or not exactly, but it had been hardening since Walter stepped back from the board, and Darius had taken the system in directions that made Walter's chest feel tight in a way he couldn't entirely attribute to his cardiac history. There had been a meeting the previous February about restructuring the charity care budget. Walter had not been in the room. He had read the minutes. He said to Darius on the phone, "I want to know who made a payment on account number 4471-W December." Darius said he didn't have that information handy. Walter said, "I'd like you to find it." There was a pause. "Dad," Darius said, "what were you doing as a patient under a false name in our hospital?" Walter said, "Finding out." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll call you back," Darius said. Darius called Priya. Priya consulted with the compliance office, which determined that the identity of a third-party payer, unlike that of a patient, was not protected under the same confidentiality provisions, and that the information could be disclosed to the hospital's ownership. Priya pulled the record. She called Darius back. She read him the name on the cash envelope. Renee Caldwell, Dietary Aid, Meridian Regional, Main Campus, badge number 2214. Darius sat with that for a moment. He pulled her employee file, grey uniform, 7 years of service. Performance reviews. Meets expectations, exceeds expectations, meets expectations, exceeds expectations. No complaints. One commendation from a patient 2 years back, handwritten on a comment card and scanned into the system. The comment card said, "The woman who brings the food took care of my father when he was scared. I don't know her name, but she has brown eyes and she talks to him like he matters." Darius read that line twice. He called his father back and read it to him. Walter did not say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "Darius, I want you to find out what she needs." Darius was quiet for a long moment. He was not the kind of man who made decisions the way his father did, from instinct, from something that moved in the chest before the head caught up. He ran spreadsheets, he ran projections. He had restructured the charity care budget the previous February because the numbers required it, and the board agreed, and he had not been wrong about the numbers. He sat with the name Renee Caldwell and with the fact of what she had done, and he felt something he was less practiced at than his father but had not entirely lost, the specific discomfort of a man who has made decisions about what a place should cost and who is now looking at the bill that someone else paid for those decisions. He did not say any of this to his father. "Not as a gift," Walter said, "as a starting place. Find out what she needs." It took Darius's assistant 3 days to piece together the picture without Renee knowing she was the subject of it. A public eviction filing. A bus wrote, "A 7-year-old son enrolled in Marcus Caldwell's school, listed under emergency contact as Renee. An address in Avondale." The picture was not complicated. It was the picture of a woman who had given away the things she could not afford to give and was now paying the price of it with every quiet morning. On a Thursday in the second week of January, Renee was in the break room on her lunch half hour when her supervisor, a woman named Carol, came to the door and said there was someone asking for her at the main entrance. Carol said it the way she said most things, which was without ceremony, and Renee assumed it was a billing inquiry or a form she had forgotten to sign. She walked to the main entrance. A man was standing near the information desk. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered in a dark suit, with close-cropped hair and an expression that was careful and serious. He introduced himself as Darius Briggs. The name meant nothing to her. He said, "I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Regional Medical Center." She looked at him. She looked at the lobby around her, the lobby she had walked through 1,000 times with her cart, the chairs where she had seen people sit for hours waiting for news, the desk where a volunteer named Hattie always had sugar-free candy in a dish. She looked back at Darius. "Is there a problem with my work?" she said. "No," he said. "No, there's not." He paused. "My father was a patient here in November. He goes by the name Walter." She looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes. "He wanted me to thank you," Darius said. "Properly." Renee looked down at the floor for a moment, then back up. "He doesn't need to thank me," she said. "I hope he's doing all right." "He is!" Darius paused again. He was not a man who fumbled his words, but he fumbled slightly here. "Miss Caldwell, my father built this hospital. He is the Walter Briggs on the building on the east side of this campus." She was very still. "He came here as a patient without disclosing that," Darius said, "because he wanted to understand what that experience was like, and he does understand it now. And part of what he found out was that someone paid $4,300 toward his bill out of her own pocket. And we know who that was." Renee did not say anything. "He also found out," Darius said, and his voice dropped a register, "what it cost you to do that." The lobby was busy around them. A man pushed a wheelchair past. Hattie looked up from the information desk and looked away again. Renee stood in the middle of all of it and said, "I didn't do it for him to find out." "I know," Darius said. "He knows." She pressed her lips together. She was not going to cry in this lobby. She had made a decision about that before she even consciously decided it. "What do you need me to say?" she asked. She kept her voice even. "I don't want anything from this. I mean that." Darius said, "My father doesn't either. He wants to offer you something because you earned it, not because you expect it. There's a difference. He asked me to give you this." He held out an envelope. She did not take it immediately. She looked at it the way she had looked at a lot of things in the last year, with the careful appraisal of a person who has learned that some things come with a cost she can't see yet. Then she took it. Inside was a single folded letter, handwritten, and a cheque. She unfolded the letter first. The handwriting was large and slightly unsteady, the hand of someone who had recently been unwell, someone who had been careful with the pen, pressing each word into the paper like it mattered which words he chose. It said, "You brought me soup when I was cold. You paid my bill when I was broke. You didn't know my name, and you didn't ask for mine in return." I don't know how to repay that, but I would like to try. This check is back pay for something I should have been paying all along. The other matter is in a separate letter that Darius will explain. She looked at the check. Her vision swam for a moment and she steadied it. $50,000. She folded the check back into the envelope with the letter. She pressed the envelope against her chest. She breathed once, slowly. Darius said quietly, "The other matter is a position. My father wants to know if you would consider a role in patient experience. It's a full-time salaried position, benefits, a different pay grade. He said to tell you that you already understand what this hospital should feel like to the people inside it, and that is worth more than most of the training we do." But he wanted it to be a choice, not an obligation. Renee was quiet for a long time. The lobby went on around her. Someone laughed at the reception desk. A child walked past, holding a balloon. "Can I think about it?" she said. "Take as long as you need," Darius said. She thought about it for 4 days. She did not tell Claudette about any of it. Claudette would have opinions, loud and loving ones, and Renee needed to sit with it alone first. She sat with it on the bus rides to work and on her break in the cafeteria and at the kitchen table after Marcus was asleep. She wrote some things down in the small notebook she kept in her bag. Not a list of pros and cons, just words. Marcus, benefits, cart, Bev, useful. She did not write down money, though money was part of it. She did not write down fear, though that was part of it too. What she kept coming back to was a question she had asked herself before in other versions, when the choice was whether to take the overnight shift or the day shift, when Marcus was a newborn, and she did not want to leave him. The question was not, "What will this cost me?" The question was, "What kind of person do I want him to see when he looks at me in 10 years? She thought about Marcus and the number 7 bus and the permission slip for the art museum that she had been able to cover with the $41 and a handful of quarters from the jar on the counter. She thought about her mother Dora, who had died 6 years ago and who had given away things she could not afford to give her entire adult life and had never once seemed to regret it. She thought about the night she had gone to the billing office with the envelope, how her hands had been completely steady. She had noticed that. She had expected them to shake. On the 4th day, she called the number on Darius Briggs's card. He answered on the 2nd ring. "I'll take it," she said. She heard him exhale, not the exhale of a CEO closing a deal, the exhale of a person relieved by something that matters. "Good," he said. "My father will be glad." She started the position in March. They gave her a small office on the 3rd floor with a window that looked out over the parking structure and, beyond it, a strip of sky. She had a desk and a phone and a laptop and a title she was still getting used to. Director of Patient Experience, Meridian Regional Medical Center, Main Campus. Her job, as she understood it, was to be the person who paid attention to the parts of the hospital that the institutional mind tended to miss, the chair too hard for a person with a bad back. The hallway where the ceiling tiles had been dripping for 3 months and no one had filed the work order. The night shift dietary aide who had been doing the same cart rounds Renee had done for 7 years and who, Renee learned in her first week, had never once been asked by anyone in an administrative capacity whether she needed anything. She asked. The aide's name was Bev. She was 53 years old and she had worked the overnight cart for 9 years, and she had a bad knee and she had asked once, 2 years ago, for a cart with better wheels, and the request had been filed and forgotten. Renee filed it again in writing with her own name on it, and the cart with better wheels arrived inside of 2 weeks. Bev did not make a production of it. She just started her shift one night, tested the wheels on the break room linoleum, went up the hallway and came back and said to Renee, who happened to be passing with a coffee and a folder of facilities requests, "These are nice." "They should have been yours years ago," Renee said. Bev nodded once. She pushed the cart to the first room on her list. That was enough. Renee had not expected the job to feel the way it felt. She had expected to feel out of place behind a desk, dressed differently than she had dressed for 7 years, speaking in rooms where people wore lanyards with titles on them and talked about things like benchmarks and patient satisfaction scores. She had expected to feel like an imposter. She did not feel like an imposter. She felt for the first time in a long time like she was exactly in the right place at the right time, doing the things she already knew how to do, and that the only difference was that now someone had given her a key to the rooms where the decisions were made. She used the key. She spent her first 2 weeks walking the floors she had always walked, only now with a notepad and a different colour badge, asking the questions no one had asked the overnight staff in longer than anyone could clearly remember. The housekeeping team on the 3rd floor had been requesting a supply room rearrangement for 11 months. The volunteers at the information desk had been out of the small Spanish-language brochures that explained the admission process since August. The oncology waiting area had a broken recliner that a man named Douglas had been avoiding for 6 weeks and managing without mentioning, because he had learned, as patients learn, that the easiest thing to do when a place is understaffed is to not add to it. She filed the supply room request. She ordered the brochures. She had the recliner replaced. None of these things were dramatic. That was the point. Marcus took the school bus every morning, the way he always had, but now he had after-school care that didn't require Renee to arrange pickup with 3 different neighbours and a complicated handoff system involving a spare key. He had a new backpack with a zipper that worked. He had the art museum trip in October and then another one in February, and he came home from the February trip with a drawing he had made of a woman in a museum standing in front of a very large painting. And when Renee asked who the woman was, he said, "It's you, Mom. You look happy." She taped it to the inside of her office door. Walter came to the hospital in April, officially this time under his full name, for a follow-up appointment with the cardiology team. Darius had asked Renee if she wanted to be there, and she had said she would be wherever she was supposed to be, and wherever she could help, and Darius had smiled at that in a way that told her his father would have said something similar. She saw Walter in the corridor outside the cardiology suite. He was smaller than she remembered, or maybe she had just held him larger in her mind for months. He was wearing a grey jacket and walking with a cane he hadn't had in November, and when he saw her, he stopped. For a moment, neither of them said anything. "You look different without the cart," he finally said. "You look different not sitting in a hallway," she said. He laughed. It was a short, genuine laugh, the laugh of an old man surprised into warmth. "You doing all right?" she asked. She asked it the way she had always asked, with the whole of it behind the question. "Better," he said. "Getting there." He paused. "You?" "Better," she said. "Getting there." He nodded. He seemed to want to say something else, and he thought about it for a moment, and then he said, "My son read me a comment card from 2 years ago. A family member wrote it, about someone on the overnight dietary staff." "I know the one," she said. "He talks to him like he matters," Walter said. "That's what it said." She looked at him. "You never stop doing that," he said. "That's the thing. Not for me. For everyone." She looked down at the linoleum for a moment, the institutional pale grey she had known for 7 years, the floor that had carried her cart and her tired feet, and her quiet determination so many nights she had lost count. "Somebody did it for me once," she said. "Long time ago. Someone on the overnight shift at a different place. When my mother was sick." She paused. "I never forgot it." Walter stood with that, the cane in his hand, the cardiology suite behind him. "Kindness keeps going," he said, "even when you stop watching it." She didn't say anything. Sometimes the right response to the truth is just to let it land. He went on to his appointment. She went on to hers, a meeting on the 2nd floor about the waiting area chair situation, which turned out to require a facilities request and a small budget line, and the patience to push it through 2 committees, which was fine. Renee had patience. She had been building it her whole life, one shift at a time, one cartwheel turn at a time, one small, faithful act at a time, and she had learned that it did not run out. It accumulated. It waited. It found eventually exactly the moment it was needed. A year after she took the position, the hospital installed a plaque outside the East Wing entrance, just below the one that bore his name. It was a modest thing, a small brass rectangle. The words read, "Patient Experience Program, founded in the spirit of those who serve without being seen." There was no name on it. Renee had asked them not to put her name on it. She had told Darius that the people it was for wouldn't be looking for her name. They would be looking for someone who noticed them. He had agreed. She walked past that plaque every morning and every evening, coming and going, badge on her lapel the way she always had. She did not always pause at it. But on the days she did, she thought about her mother Dora, who had given away things she could not afford and never seemed to count the cost. And she thought about the woman on the overnight shift at a different hospital in a different city, whose name she had never known, who had stopped and asked if she needed something warm. She thought about how long those things last, how far they go, how you can plant something in a hallway at 11 at night and not see it come up for years. And then, one ordinary morning, it is just there, standing in the light, bigger than you knew you had planted. Marcus turned 9 in June. He had a party with 6 kids from his class and a grocery store cake with a soccer ball on it, and a piñata shaped like a star that took 11 attempts to break open, which the children considered a personal triumph. He ate 2 pieces of cake and fell asleep on the couch before 8, and she covered him with the blanket that had been their grandmother's, the one Dora had kept on the arm of her chair, the pale blue one with the frayed edge that Marcus had named Old Soft when he was 3 years old. She sat in the quiet of the living room after the last guest had gone and listened to him breathe. The apartment was the same apartment. She had not moved. She had paid the rent 3 months ahead when the cheque cleared, and she had put the rest into a savings account at the credit union on 5th, and it was still there, growing with the kind of steadiness that feels almost bewildering when you have been used to the math always coming out wrong. She had no plans to spend it fast. She had plans to let it be there, to let it mean that the next emergency would not require a choice like the one she had made in October, and if it did, she would be able to make a different one. Old Soft was barely visible in the dim room, just the pale blue at the edge, Marcus's hand resting on it in sleep. She thought about the $41. She thought about the envelope she had pushed across Priya's counter. She thought about the flatbed truck with her Civic strapped to the back, driving away while she stood on the curb with her spine straight and her hands quiet. She thought about all of it as something that had happened a long time ago, though it had only been 14 months. Time moves differently when the thing you were carrying gets set down. You look back and it seems further than it is. She reached over and turned off the lamp. In the dark, she could still see the faint outline of her son, asleep under his grandmother's blanket, one hand curled under his chin, and she held that image the way you hold the things you have worked the hardest for, carefully, knowing they are real. Have you ever given something away that you could not afford to lose? Leave a comment below. There are more stories like this one waiting for you right here on this channel, and every one of them is about a person who kept going when the world was not watching. We will see you in the next one. This story is a work of fiction. The characters and events depicted are imaginary and are intended for entertainment purposes only.